I was not supposed to speak at the feast. I was not even supposed to be noticed. My job that night was to stand near the far wall with the rest of the human support staff, carry trays when asked, and stay quiet while the important people from Earth shook hands with the important people from the sky. My name does not matter much in this story. What matters is that I used to work in a food safety lab before I signed up for this posting. I spent 3 years testing soil samples and complaining about paperwork. Nobody on the ship thought that background was useful. They picked me for this trip because I could carry boxes and follow instructions, not because I understood chemistry. Funny how things turn out. The hall itself was the kind of place that makes you feel very small. The ceiling curved up into a dome, painted with stars that were not our stars. Long tables stretched across the floor, covered in cloth that shimmered when the light hit it. Hundreds of alien nobles sat in neat rows, dressed in colors I did not have names for, and at the head of it all sat the queen. She was tall, even sitting down. Her skin had a faint blue sheen, like the surface of a lake at dusk. She wore a crown that looked too heavy for comfort, though she carried it like it weighed nothing. When she moved, the whole room seemed to lean toward her, the way plants lean toward sunlight. This was supposed to be a simple night. Humanity had just signed its first real agreement with her kingdom. Trade routes, shared research, a promise that we would not shoot first and ask questions later, which apparently was a big deal to species who had met other species before us. The feast was meant to celebrate all of that. I stood near the wall and watched servers carry course after course to the royal table. Some dishes I recognized. Others looked like nothing I had ever seen. Folded leaves, glowing broths, small creatures still curled in their shells. I was not there to eat. I was there to watch and learn, and mostly to stay out of the way. Then they brought out the final course. It was a pale, soft dish, shaped like a flower, resting on a stone plate. Steam rose from it in slow curls. The whole hall went quiet in a different way now. Not the polite quiet of conversation pausing, but the reverent quiet of something important happening. An older alien in ceremonial robes stepped forward and spoke a few words I did not understand, though the tone was clear enough. This was an honor. This dish was made only for the queen. I should have looked away. I should have kept my eyes on my tray and my mouth shut. But something about the smell reached me from across the hall, and it pulled at a memory I did not want. 3 years ago, in that food safety lab, we had a case that never made the news. A batch of imported grain had been grown in soil treated with a cheap fertilizer substitute. The fertilizer itself was harmless, but when it broke down in certain conditions, it created a compound that built up quietly in the body over time. No immediate symptoms, no dramatic reaction, just a slow, steady failure of the body's systems, spread out over weeks. We caught it because one worker at the processing plant got sick in a strange, gradual way that did not match any known illness. It took us months to trace it back. The smell coming from that flower-shaped dish carried the same faint sharpness. The same one. I was almost sure of it. I told myself I was wrong. I told myself alien food chemistry was not human food chemistry, that I was pattern matching where no pattern existed, that speaking up would be an insult to our hosts on the most important night of the new agreement. I told myself all of that in about 2 seconds, standing against the wall with a tray in my hands. Then the queen reached for the dish. I moved before I finished deciding to move. I stepped away from the wall, walked fast between 2 long tables, and said the only words that came to me. "Don't eat that." My voice was not loud. I am not a person who yells, but the hall was so silent, waiting for the queen's first bite, that my words landed like a dropped plate. Every head turned, every conversation stopped mid-sentence. The queen's hand, halfway to the dish, froze in the air. I want to describe the silence that followed, but I am not sure words are enough. It was not just quiet. It was the kind of stillness where you can hear your own heartbeat, where the air itself seems to be waiting to see what happens next. Guards near the walls straightened, hands moved toward weapons, though none were drawn. Somewhere behind me, I heard one of our own delegation members whisper my name like a warning. The queen turned her head slowly and looked at me. Her eyes were a deep gold color, and they studied me with an expression I could not read. Not anger exactly, but something close to disbelief. A servant does not interrupt a queen. A guest from a species barely known to her court certainly does not interrupt a queen during a ceremonial course. in front of every noble family in her kingdom. "Explain," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge under the calm, like a blade wrapped in cloth. I had maybe 3 seconds to decide whether my next words would help us or ruin everything we had just built. I thought about staying quiet, about saying I misspoke, about finding some polite way to take it back, but I could still smell that sharp note rising off the dish, and I could not make myself pretend I hadn't noticed it. "I worked with food safety, back on Earth," I said. My voice shook a little, but I kept going. "That smell, I have smelled it before, on food that was safe to look at but was not safe to eat. It builds up slowly. It would not hurt anyone right away. That's what makes it dangerous. Nobody would know something was wrong until much later." A ripple went through the hall, soft murmurs in a language I only partly understood. The old alien in ceremonial robes, the one who had presented the dish, stepped forward with his hands raised, clearly offended. He said something fast and sharp, and even without knowing the words, I understood the shape of it. He was saying I was wrong, that this dish had been prepared by the royal kitchen for generations, that no human, new to this world, barely a season into knowing them, could possibly understand their food better than they did. He was not wrong to be angry. From where he stood, I had just publicly accused the royal kitchen of poisoning the queen in front of the entire court, based on nothing but a smell. The queen raised one hand, and the hall fell quiet again. "You claim to know something my own people do not," she said, looking at me. "That is a serious claim. What proof do you offer?" I did not have proof. Not real proof, not yet. What I had was training, and instinct, and a memory of a case that took months to solve, even with real equipment. I could not exactly pull out a lab in the middle of a feast. "I don't have proof standing here," I admitted, "but I have a way to find out quickly, if you'll allow it. If I'm wrong, you can do whatever you feel is right for the insult, but if I'm right, someone should know before anyone else in this hall eats a dish made the same way." I do not know where I found the nerve to say that last part. Looking back, it might have been the most reckless thing I have ever said, but it was true, and it needed saying. The queen studied me for a long moment. Then she turned to the old chef and said something short. He looked furious, but he bowed and stepped back. "There is a small creature kept in the royal kitchens," the queen said, her eyes still on me. "It tests food before it reaches me, though tonight, in the excitement of the ceremony, that step was skipped in favor of tradition. Bring it. We will see whether the human's nose is worth more than the ceremony," he interrupted. A servant hurried out and returned a few minutes later with a small, quick creature in a woven basket, something like a cross between a bird and a lizard, with bright, curious eyes. It was set near the dish. The whole hall watched as it sniffed the air, then leaned toward the flower-shaped food. I held my breath. If I was wrong, I had just humiliated myself, insulted the royal kitchen, and possibly damaged the first real agreement between two species, all over a smell I might have imagined. The creature took a small bite. For a moment, nothing happened, and my stomach dropped. Then the creature's bright eyes dimmed. Its quick movements slowed. It swayed once, twice, and had to be caught by the servant before it fell from the table. It was not gone. I want to be clear about that. Nobody died that night. But it was clearly, visibly unwell, in exactly the slow, creeping way I had described. The hall did not stay silent this time. It erupted into noise, gasps, sharp words, the scrape of chairs as nobles half rose from their seats. The old chef went pale, his anger replaced by something closer to horror. He began speaking rapidly to the queen, and though I could not follow all of it, I understood enough. A new supplier. A cheaper source of the flower's growing soil, brought in only this season to save cost ahead of the feast. Nobody had thought to question it. Why would they? It looked the same. It smelled almost the same, at least to noses that had not spent 3 years learning to notice the difference. The queen sat very still for a long moment, looking at the creature being carried away to be cared for, then looking at the dish that had been meant for her. Then she looked at me. "You have no reason to protect me," she said quietly, though the hall was listening to every word. "My people are new to yours. We have given your kind little cause for loyalty. Yet you risked insult, and worse, to warn me. I did not know what to say to that, so I told the truth. I didn't think about loyalty. I just knew something was wrong, and I couldn't stay quiet and let it happen anyway. Something shifted in her expression then, something that looked almost like the beginning of respect, though I am cautious about claiming I understood alien expressions so easily. Among my people, she said, there is an old saying, a crown protects the head that wears it. But tonight, a stranger protected the crown itself, expecting nothing in return. She rose from her seat, and the whole hall rose with her, a wave of movement following her lead. Let it be known, this human spoke out of turn tonight, and the royal house is in his debt for it. I do not remember bowing, though I must have. I do not remember walking back to the wall, though I must have done that too. What I remember most clearly is the look on the old chef's face afterward, not anger anymore, just a tired kind of gratitude, and the quiet nod the queen gave me before the feast resumed with a different dish. Nothing about that night made me a hero in any big way. I did not fight anything. I did not save a city or win a war. I simply noticed something wrong and said so, even when staying silent would have been so much easier. But I think that is exactly why it mattered. Trust between our two peoples did not begin with grand speeches or powerful ships. It began in a quiet moment, when a queen chose to believe a stranger, and a stranger chose to speak up instead of staying safely silent. That, I have come to believe, is worth more than any treaty signed on paper.